And so the dome must go. How can they get rid of the dome? Well, there must be a war in the Middle East. There must be a World War III, just as Pike told Mazzini, and it must be focused and centered on the Middle East. And maybe those buildings will be destroyed. Maybe they'll blame it on Iran or Iraq or some other Muslim Arab leader. They will say the missiles went over there and from the Arab country, Iraq, Iran, and strayed and blew up. They blew up their own temple. The Arabs did it to themselves. I don't know what their pretext will be. Or there may be other ways that they will get rid of this. Now, interestingly enough, in Time magazine several years ago, talked about a tremendous controversy that had erupted over in Israel. It seems that the Jewish rabbi, Lau, the chief rabbi, oh, that name keeps coming up, doesn't it? Here he is visiting tunnels under the Temple Mount. The Jews opened up these tunnels that had not been opened for hundreds of years, centuries, and they began to go in there and visit those tunnels. And the Muslims were outraged because they believe. And here below we see in the bottom of this article, it talks about, the situation, the setting up, or where these tunnels are underneath the Temple Mount. You can see, of course, here the Dome of the Rock of the Muslims that sit there now. And the plan, they believed, was to use these tunnels to set explosives that will blow up. So they would foment a World War III or a war with the Arabs. And then just as all the bombs were going off in various cities, maybe in Saudi Arabia, in Jordan, in Lebanon, in Egypt, in Iraq and Iran, at the same time missiles or bombs supposedly could be blamed as the cause for the destruction of the Islamic worship places. But in fact, it would be that Jewish agents with powerful bombs would go down deep in these tunnels and blow up the Temple Mount. And this, of course, if this occurred, this could set off World War III, could it not? The fury of the Arabs, of the Muslim world. But of course, Kriegel Publications, a Christian publication a few years back, published this book, the Kriegel Guide, a pictorial guide to the temple. This is Herod's temple. And this is the temple that many believe that the Masons and the Jews want to rebuild. Others talk about building the Temple of Solomon. The Temple of Solomon. Now, I might mention that if the temple is built again, of course that would fulfill 2 Thessalonians chapter 2, where Paul talked about the Antichrist just before the gathering of the saints by Jesus. The Antichrist would go into a rebuilt temple and declare that he was God and above all gods, and a strong delusion would fall on all the people of the world. Here's an article, by the way, from the Houston Sunday Globe talking about the red heifer. The Jews say we must find a red heifer, a cow that is perfect, that is totally red and does not have one white hair, does not have one brown hair. He's got to have beautiful red hair. He's got to be a perfect physically in every way. And here is a rabbi inspecting this red heifer. They believe they may have found one already. And then they will sacrifice this red heifer and use the ashes in the temple. The sacrifice can begin again in a rebuilt temple. Here, a Christian publication, Prophetic Observer, talks about the ashes of the red heifer. But listen to this, my friends. Jesus is the one sacrifice. And if the temple is built again and the Jews begin to have their sacrifices, listen to what Matthew 24 verse 15 says. It says, when ye therefore shall see the abomination of desolation, spoken of by Daniel the prophet, stand in the holy place, then let them which be in Judea flee into the mountains. My friends, that would be the abomination of desolation, to actually sacrifice this red heifer in the temple, the rebuilt temple. Of course, the Bible makes very clear that another temple is going to be built someday, a temple built without hands, and there will be a new Jerusalem, not this earthly Jerusalem, a Jerusalem constructed by Jesus Christ. In the book by Ice and another gentleman, here is a picture of the entrance of the a rabbinic place in Jerusalem where they are now training rabbis and workers to go into the rebuilt temple and to conduct the sacrifices. Here is a man, Rabbi Yehuda Getz, a chief rabbi of all the holy places in Israel. Now that's a different position than Rabbi Lau. And this rabbi claims that he knows where the Ark of the Covenant is, of course, and that they're ready to put it in the rebuilt temple. Of course, that's nonsense because the Ark of the Covenant is now in heaven. There are museums. There are museums in Israel today. And these museums actually have scale models of the Temple Mount with the rebuilt temple. Oh, they're planning on doing it, my friends. See these? See these scale models? And by the way, one of these scale models, it can be found in the Rockefeller Museum in Jerusalem. Yes, there is a Rockefeller Museum. What are the Chase Manhattan Bank's Rockefellers doing with a museum in Jerusalem? And why does it have a scale model of the temple to be rebuilt? By the way, here's a model of the Ark of the Covenant that these Jews of the Temple Mount Foundation claim that they have readied. They say the real Ark, they know where it's at, but here is just a part of it. By the way, in his book, Albert Pike, remember I talked about him, the former sovereign grand commander of Freemasonry. In this old book, Morals and Dogma, that he wrote, he talks about the meaning of the Temple of Solomon and the necessity of building a Temple of Solomon. In fact, he said, in essence, symbolically, the Temple of Solomon is built in the life of every Mason. So it is their goal to rebuild this Temple of Solomon. Now, let's move real fast here, and I wanted to tell you about this book, an amazing book. This man, John J. Robinson, wrote this book, The Lost Secrets of Freemasonry. The Masons raved about this book. It was reviewed in their publication, the Scottish Rite Journal. They loved this book. Robinson was actually promoted, if my understanding is correct, to the 33rd degree of Freemasonry through this book. He was not even a Mason at the time he wrote it, but he was promoted. Look at the front cover. What do you see there? You see the Masonic emblem with a G. That's meaning of God, meaning the generative principle. But look, it is slowly transformed into what? Of course, the Jewish Star of David. Isn't that fascinating? Now, let me tell you a little bit about this book. Mr. Robinson said in the final chapter of this book that it should be the goal of Freemasons worldwide to build a new temple, the Temple of Solomon, and it should be built there on the Temple Mount. And all religions, not only the three major religions, all religions, but as particularly the Jews, the Muslims, and the Christians, can go to the great Temple of Solomon built by the Masons on the Temple Mount. That's what it says in this book. That's what it says in this book. Powerful, powerful proposal to build a Masonic Temple of Solomon on the Temple Mount in Jerusalem. This then is their goal, and their leader will go into this incredible temple. You might want to get my video, Thunder Over Zion, and it talks about the Antichrist and how they will actually stage the coming of the Antichrist. There's even a book that's been written called The Armageddon Script that has the entire script. It'll be a theatrical production. It'll be televised. Everyone will believe in him. Buddhists, Hindus, Christians, Jews, except the true believers of Jesus. Now, friends, what are we to do about this? You know, the Apostle Paul said that the Jews are in bondage. Jerusalem, earthly Jerusalem, is in bondage. I believe we need to pray. We need to pray for the salvation of Jews. We need to pray even for these Masons that their eyes will be opened. We need to pray for our protection. And we need to pray that God will give us even more knowledge of these events of the last days. He promised us in Daniel 12:10, the wise shall understand. Pray for more wisdom. Pray that Jesus Christ's will be done. This is Texe Morris. May God richly bless you.